will provide us with jobs. It will provide us, more importantly, with decisions. Finally, we can actually have an agency that makes a decision in a timely manner. With that, Mr. Speaker, I will now yield back the balance of my time, and I move the previous question on the resolution.
The gentleman yields back his time. The question is on ordering the previous question on the resolution. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker,
gentleman from Florida.
I ask for the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those in favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. Pursuant to Clause 8 and Clause 9 of Rule 20, the 15-minute vote on ordering the previous question will be followed by 5-minute votes on adoption of House Resolution 347 if ordered, and the motion to suspend the rules on H.R. 301. This is a 15-minute vote.
The House has been debating the rule for the Strategic Minerals Bill, legislation that would streamline the permitting process for mining on certain federal lands. A vote on the rule is next. That rule would allow for an hour of general debate and for 5 amendments to be considered. 15-minute vote here, previous question vote, and then the rule vote next, a series of 3 roll call votes in the House this afternoon. Off the floor of the House, discussions continue on how to move forward on issues like federal spending, continuing federal spending, implementation of the health care law, and raising the debt ceiling. Republican leaders this morning announced they will bring to the floor late this week a continuing resolution that will fund the federal government through December the 15th at sequester levels and extend the debt ceiling, the nation's authority to borrow and deny funding for the implementation of the health care law. Speaker Boehner and other Republican leaders spoke to reporters for just over 10 minutes.
Where's Eric?
Where'd Eric go?
Oh, it's a long walk. Oh, there you are. You know, the President thinks that American families and small businesses are doing just fine in this economy. Speech after speech is about justifying his failed policies. And one of his biggest failures is adding $6 trillion to the national debt. You know, for decades, Congresses and presidents have used the debt limit for legislation to cut spending, and even President Obama worked with us 2 years ago in the debt limit negotiations to put controls on spending. This year is not going to be any different. We're going to continue to do everything we can to repeal the President's failed health care law. This week, the House will pass a CR that locks the sequester savings in and defunds Obamacare. The President has signed 7 bills over the last 2.5 years to make changes to Obamacare, and I sincerely hope our friends in the Senate have plans to make this an 8th time. The law is a train wreck. The President has protected American big business. It's time to protect American families from this unworkable law.
Good morning. First, I want to express my deepest condolences to the families who have lost a loved one on Monday in the horrific attack on the Navy Yard, just blocks away from Capitol Hill. It is in these tragic moments that we also witness the steel resolve of all those who serve our nation there, as well as the first responders who came to help. Now, we've just come out of our conference and had a very good discussion on our work on a budget measure that will continue our record of reduced government spending and deals head-on with Obamacare. Not since the Korean War has the federal government reduced spending 2 years in a row. We aim to make that happen. And we aim to put a stop to Obamacare before it costs one more job or raises a family's out-of-pocket expenses $1 more. And that fight will continue as we negotiate the debt limit with the President and the Senate. In the coming weeks, in the coming week, we will unveil a plan to extend our nation's ability to borrow while delaying Obamacare and protecting working middle-class families from its horrific effects. Those discussions will also focus on a path forward on tax reform and the Keystone Pipeline, and a variety of other measures designed to lower energy prices, simplify our tax system, and get our economy going for the middle-class working people of this country. Together, we House Republicans will not ignore the problem of our debt or the problems facing the working middle class of this country. And so we hope and we ask that this President finally engage with Congress and work with us on behalf of the American families.
We all join with the comments that the leader made on the loss that we saw this Monday. I will tell you, we just walked out of conference, and I notice all of you stay outside to see what's the feel, what's the motion, what does it look like. I have not watched our conference be so united as we walk into this battle. I think you're going to see a very big excitement coming through this week and next week as well as we move legislation. The excitement is the united conference going after the battle we've always been willing to wage. But now we're going to look forward to the Senate joining with us. The President laid out many times of different portions of his health care bill that's not prepared for the rest of the nation. We think its time is delayed. And we think using the President, and it's not just us who talk about it, the union leaders as well. He wants to pick just big business to save. We think the individual matters more. And that's what you'll see come forward out of the House.
I'd like to join in offering condolences to the families that lost their loved ones on Monday. Our hearts and our prayers continue to be with them. And it was a terrible day here in our nation's capital. Also on Monday, we heard from the President regarding the economy, and he said that, quote, we need to work together to create jobs, grow our economy, and expand opportunity. And what I'd like to remind the President is that that has been our goal since day one. And it's unfortunate that it is many of the President's policies that are making it harder on Americans all across this country. And we see Americans that continue to have a tough time finding a job in this economy. They're seeing their premiums go up for their health insurance. It's harder at the gas pump. This is the longest, 1,000 days plus, that gas has been over $3 a gallon. First time ever. At the grocery store, it's harder to pay the bills. And the Republicans are focused on policies that will make it easier, that will create a climate, a stronger economy for America, so that people will have an easier time finding a job, paying the bills, and for those that are graduating from college, finding a job. That's our commitment. These are not just numbers, these are real people's lives, and the policies that we debate day in and day out make a difference in people's lives. And we are committed to working with the President, working with the Senate, where we can, to move policies forward that are going to make a positive difference and get people back to work.
The President did say earlier this week that the economy is not where he would like it to be, something that my constituents are very well aware of every time they go to the doctor, go to the grocery store, fill up their automobile with gasoline. It is not where it needs to be. And after 5 years as President, we are hoping that he will turn to Congress and work with us to improve this economy. The unemployment rate was slightly down this month, but it's because people have all but given up looking for work. I think the more important statistic is that the workforce participation rate is the lowest it's been in 35 years, the lowest since 1978. And while we stand ready to work with the President on a number of issues that have been articulated already on the health care law to Keystone, tax reform is something that those of us on Ways and Means have been working on for several years now. We have the highest corporate tax rate in the world. Every minute we refuse to pursue tax reform, we are incentivizing businesses to take their jobs offshore. That's the wrong answer. We have been working very hard to make life easier for our small businesses by lowering the rates, eliminating the loopholes that only the very wealthy take advantage of. We want to put more money in hardworking American taxpayers' pockets, and so we stand ready to work with the President and hope he will engage at some point in reforming our tax code so we can get this economy moving and the American people back to work.
Thank you, and appreciate some of the comments made by the President and Vice President this week regarding the economy and the necessity to do infrastructure jobs. In fact, Mr. Biden was at a port talking about the infrastructure of our country. But yet there's been one infrastructure project that has, because of political reasons, been ignored. No action taken by this administration. I'm talking about the Keystone XL pipeline. Tomorrow marks an interesting anniversary. It's the 5th year anniversary of the Keystone permit filing. Now, what's particularly interesting about this administration ignoring this infrastructure and jobs and economic driver bill and project is that shortly into his first year, the President did sign and the State Department did recommend a cross-border permit of a pipeline carrying oil sands into the United States. So the President didn't have a problem with the Alberta Clipper pipeline delivering oil into the United States and crossing the border until it became an environmental issue on the Keystone pipeline. And only then, and because of politics, has the President refused to act on the permit. So I'm proud that our leadership is now discussing and contemplating putting Keystone Pipeline in whatever opportunities we may have with debt ceiling and continuing resolutions. I appreciate our leadership continued focus on this type of a job bill.
Question.
Speaker, no secret that you did not want to attach Obamacare to, defunding Obamacare to this spending bill. I know it's not been easy to be the Speaker over this caucus, but at this point, have you just kind of lost control over the caucus?
Listen, we've got a lot of divergent opinions in the caucus, and the key to any leadership job is to listen. You know, I was here during the Gingrich era. He had a little plaque that was in his office, and it was a management model. Listen, learn, help, and lead. We listened to our colleagues over the course of the last week. We have a plan that they're happy with. We're going forward.
Mr. Speaker, doesn't this, to some degree, by moving this to the Senate, I know there's some of the plan last week, but isn't that a fait accompli? I mean, there's not going to be 60 votes. Harry Reid is probably going to strip certain things out of there, including health care.
Listen, the fight over here has been won. The House has voted 40 times to defund, change Obamacare, to repeal it. It's time for the Senate to have this fight.
But don't you know what's going to happen?
I'm not going to predict what the Senate's going to do or not do.
Mr. Speaker, will you let the House work its will and vote up or down on whatever the Senate's going to back?
I'm not going to speculate on what the Senate's going to do or not do or what we're going to do or not do because it's very premature.
Our last question. Mr. Speaker, do you believe that the implications and the ramifications of a possible government shutdown are the same for the Republican Party this time as they were in 1999?
Listen, there should be no conversation about shutting the government down. That's not the goal here. Our goal here is to cut spending and to protect the American people from Obamacare. It's as simple as that. There's no interest on our part in shutting the government down. Thanks.
When are these votes going to happen?
Boom.
Hey, Secretary, how are you?
House Republicans earlier today. This is the first of 3 votes that are taking place in the House today. This is a vote on the rule for considering legislation that would streamline the permitting process for mining on certain federal lands. Under the rule, there'd be an hour of general debate with 5 amendments to follow. If this rule is approved, we should expect general debate to start shortly after the vote wraps up. Later this week, House leaders plan to debate temporary government funding, among other items. And we spoke with a Capitol Hill reporter just a short time ago to find out more. Joining me is Jonathan Strong, political reporter for the National Review. So House Republicans have announced a plan to fund the federal government after September 30th. What did they decide to do?
What they did is they put in provisions to defund Obamacare permanently, which was, a difference from the original plan floated by Majority Leader Eric Cantor, which kind of would have only forced a vote on that in the Senate. This kind of puts it in there to tee up a showdown with Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid and President Obama over Obamacare funding. There's some other provisions in the CR, one of which is called a prioritization bill, which kind of governs how the incoming tax revenue would be spent in the event that the country went past the debt ceiling deadline, which is coming up in the middle of October. So that's what's in the CR.
Well, how are House Democrats likely to vote on a continuing resolution that includes this language to defund the health care law?
I'd be surprised if any Democrats vote to support this, although the only possibility would be several kind of blue dog Democrats in vulnerable districts who want to differentiate themselves from President Obama. This is a bill that is catered to even the conservative hardliners in the GOP conference. I would expect to see a very strong vote, almost a unanimous majority on behalf of Republicans. Some of the conservatives walking out of the meeting this morning when it was announced were very gung-ho, very on board with this plan, happy to see this change, kind of a veer to the right by Speaker Boehner.
Now, assuming this bill passes in the House later this week, what are its chances in the Senate?
Dim. The chances are dim in the Senate because obviously Democrats control that chamber. What we would expect to see is Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid try to strip this out. At that point, what will happen is the Republicans will have a chance to try to filibuster that move. And whether they're able to get all their members on board, all the senators, is an open question. There's a good number of kind of moderate-leaning Republicans who might not be willing to stand up for that.
When the bill goes back to the House, though, after that defunding language is stripped from the Senate, what do you expect will happen with it there?
It's interesting. When you talk to the members coming out of this meeting, this is kind of the opening bid for not just this fight over the continuing resolution, but also for the fight on the debt ceiling that comes afterwards. And many of the conservative members are very open to kind of transitioning the fight to the debt ceiling. So what we could see is this bill, initially faltering in the Senate, and the House Republicans coming back to this issue again, going along with something that's close to a clean CR, but then renewing the demand for a new fight over the debt ceiling next week.
Lots of concern, of course, over the possibility of a government shutdown. What is the likelihood that we'll see that happen?
At this point, I believe that the likelihood of a shutdown is unlikely because the Republicans seem to be kind of okay with switching this fight to the debt ceiling. In other words, I don't think that they're going to push this matter over the edge through the vehicle of the CR. I do think when we get to the debt ceiling, we're going to have very high stakes kind of showdown between Republicans and Obama, and that is going to be very dicey. That's the place where I expect the fight to really be. The shutdown is unlikely. A lot of Republicans, House Budget Chairman Paul Ryan actually, pleaded with his colleagues in this closed-door meeting earlier that the shutdown does not help us. The public, will not side with Republicans in the event of a shutdown. The debt ceiling, he argued, is much kind of stronger ground to wage this fight.
Now, House Majority Leader Eric Cantor is saying that Republicans will continue to attach this defunding language on other hot-button issues, such as the debt ceiling. How do they propose doing that?
Well, you know, we had a debt ceiling fight in the summer of 2011, and what it comes down to kind of mechanically is that Republicans say we will only raise the debt ceiling if these, you know, X, Y, and Z are included. That will prompt negotiations between President Obama and the House Republicans. The problem is that President Obama has already said emphatically in public that he will not negotiate at all over the debt ceiling, and so you have a total impasse at this very moment.
Well, looking forward, how does this strategy resolve the deep divide between the two parties on fiscal matters?
Well, that remains to be seen. We are headed into a very high-stakes battle with a complete and utter impasse between the two parties. There's not a lot of signs that they're coming together and close to reaching an agreement on these things. There's no back-channel communications between Speaker Boehner, President Obama. There's no, kind of the Senate Republicans who had been negotiating with Obama. Those talks have stopped. So it's a very delicate point we're at, but we do still have several weeks before kind of the drop-dead moment comes.
Jonathan Strong writes on politics for the National Review. We thank you for your time today.
Oh, thank you.
And on the CR, the House Rules Committee, by the way, will be meeting on the rule for debating temporary government funding. That meeting set to take place this afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern. House votes continuing on a procedural motion related to the bill that members have been debating, the rule for taking up legislation that would streamline the permitting process for mining on certain federal lands. While this vote continues, remarks today from Defense Secretary Hagel and Joint Chiefs Chair General Martin Dempsey. They held a briefing today to talk about strengthening security at the nation's military bases in light of the attack at the Washington Navy Yard.
General public who sees the sort of string of events, Snowden, Hassan, Bradley Manning, and now this, it sort of looks as though there are incidents, there are studies, and something happens again. You did extensive studies after the Hassan incident. So can you talk about what changes were not made then that should have been made? Are there gaps? And when you look at security clearances, should we lower the bar to include more personal information or take note of greater personal information in order to protect safety? Where is that line?
Well, first, obviously, something went wrong. That's the point of the directives that I have made in the reviews that will go forward. As I said in my comments, we will review everything. And from that review, the intensity of that review, the depth and the width of that review, we would hope that we will find some answers to how we do it better. How can we do it better? The fact is, starting with the tragedy of what happened Monday, and you mentioned other tragedies, we don't live in a risk-free society. And every day, all the millions of DOD employees, whether they're uniform or civilian, that come to work, help this country, contribute to the security and safety of this country, there's always some risk to that. And that isn't a good answer. That's not good enough. They deserve the security of a safe environment. We will find those gaps, as I said, and we will fix those gaps. So to go beyond that in the specific areas of your questions, I would leave that to the review. There are many questions that are going to be asked, need to be asked, many reviews, and the intensity of those reviews have to go down to every aspect, the security of our physical premises, the security clearance, standards of that security clearance, are they strong enough? Why do we do certain things the way we do? We need answers, and we will find those answers.
Well, I just add that to what the Secretary said. In terms of what we changed after some of those earlier incidents, that early indications are actually contributed to a less horrific outcome, were alert notices, coordination in advance of crises with other agencies of government, training for employees and law enforcement on active shooter scenarios. So, I mean, some of the things we did as a result of those earlier incidents, we believe, actually reaped the benefit we intended. The clearance piece of this is one I think we very clearly have to take another look at, and the Secretary's directed us to do so.
And again, you can see that entire briefing at cspan.org. Politico is reporting this afternoon that President Obama will attend a memorial service for the victims of Monday's Navy Yard massacre. That is expected to take place Sunday, the White House has said. The president wants to mourn the loss of these innocent victims and share in the nation's pain in the aftermath of another senseless shooting. White House Press Secretary Jay Carney said at the press briefing today he provided no details about the location or the time of that service. 12 people were killed when military contractor Aaron Alexis opened fire Monday morning inside a facility at the Navy Yard in southeast Washington.
On this vote, the ayes.
Mr. Meeks. Mr. Meeks votes no. Mr. Capuano.
What do I say?
Mr. Capuano votes no.
We're waiting for the whip. On this vote, the ayes are 229, the noes are 192. The previous question is ordered. The question is on adoption of the resolution. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. Motion, the ayes have it. Motion is
Mr. Speaker,
gentleman from Florida.
Mr. Speaker, I ask for a recorded vote.
A recorded vote is requested. Those favoring a recorded vote will rise. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 5-minute vote.
House votes continuing now on the rule for taking up legislation that would streamline the permitting process for mining on certain federal lands. This is a 5-minute vote now. We should let you know that the House Rules Committee will be meeting today on the rule for debating temporary government funding. Government funding runs out on September 30th. That meeting is set to take place this afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern. We are sending a camera crew there. We will have it live online, and we will also air it on our companion network C-SPAN 3 after this afternoon's news conference with Federal Reserve Board Chair Ben Bernanke.
On this vote, the yeas are 231, the nays are 190. The resolution is adopted without objection. The motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The unfinished business is a vote on the motion of the gentleman from California, Mr. Royce, to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 301 as amended, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 301, a bill to provide for the establishment of the Special Envoy to promote religious freedom of religious minorities in the Near East and South Central Asia.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill as amended? Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 5-minute vote.
The final vote in this series is on legislation that would create a special envoy to promote religious freedom in Near East and Central Asia. This measure was debated yesterday, getting votes today. While members vote, a short time ago we spoke with a Capitol Hill reporter covering the congressional agenda, looking at some of the more urgent issues in Congress, including temporary government funding. Joining me is Jonathan Strong, political reporter for the National Review. So House Republicans have announced a plan to fund the federal government after September 30th. What did they decide to do?
What they did is they put in provisions to defund Obamacare permanently, which was, a difference from the original plan floated by Majority Leader Eric Cantor, which kind of would have only forced a vote on that in the Senate. This kind of puts it in there to tee up a showdown with Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid and President Obama over Obamacare funding. There's some other provisions in the CR, one of which is called a prioritization bill, which kind of governs how the incoming tax revenue would be spent in the event that the country went past the debt ceiling deadline, which is coming up in the middle of October. So that's what's in the CR.
Well, how are House Democrats likely to vote on a continuing resolution that includes this language to defund the health care law?
I'd be surprised if any Democrats vote to support this, although the only possibility would be several kind of blue dog Democrats in vulnerable districts who want to differentiate themselves from President Obama. This is a bill that is catered to even the conservative hardliners in the GOP conference. I would expect to see a very strong vote, almost a unanimous majority on behalf of Republicans. Some of the conservatives walking out of the meeting this morning when it was announced were very gung-ho, very on board with this plan, happy to see this change, kind of a veer to the right by Speaker Boehner.
Now, assuming this bill passes in the House later this week, what are its chances in the Senate?
Dim. The chances are dim in the Senate because obviously Democrats control that chamber. What we would expect to see is Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid try to strip this out. At that point, what will happen is the Republicans will have a chance to try to filibuster that move. And whether they're able to get all their members on board, all the senators, is an open question. There's a good number of kind of moderate-leaning Republicans who might not be willing to stand up for that.
When the bill goes back to the House, though, after that defunding language is stripped from the Senate, what do you expect will happen with it there?
Well, it's interesting. When you talk to the members coming out of this meeting, this is kind of the opening bid for not just this fight over the continuing resolution, but also for the fight on the debt ceiling that comes afterwards. And many of the conservative members are very open to kind of transitioning the fight to the debt ceiling. So what we could see is this bill, initially faltering in the Senate, and the House Republicans coming back to this issue again, going along with something that's close to a clean CR, but then renewing the demand for a new fight over the debt ceiling next week.
Lots of concern, of course, over the possibility of a government shutdown. What is the likelihood that we'll see that happen?
At this point, I believe that the likelihood of a shutdown is unlikely because the Republicans seem to be kind of okay with switching this fight to the debt ceiling. In other words, I don't think that they're going to push this matter over the edge through the vehicle of the CR. I do think when we get to the debt ceiling, we're going to have very high stakes kind of showdown between Republicans and Obama, and that is going to be very dicey. That's the place where I expect the fight to really be. The shutdown is unlikely. A lot of Republicans, House Budget Chairman Paul Ryan actually, pleaded with his colleagues in this closed-door meeting earlier that the shutdown does not help us. The public, will not side with Republicans in the event of a shutdown. The debt ceiling, he argued, is much kind of stronger ground to wage this fight.
Now, House Majority Leader Eric Cantor is saying that Republicans will continue to attach this defunding language on other hot-button issues, such as the debt ceiling. How do they propose doing that?
Well, we had a debt ceiling fight in the summer of 2011, and what it comes down to kind of mechanically is that Republicans say we will only raise the debt ceiling if these, X, Y, and Z are included. That will prompt negotiations between President Obama and the House Republicans. The problem is that President Obama has already said emphatically in public that he will not negotiate at all over the debt ceiling, and so you have a total impasse at this very moment.
Well, looking forward, how does this strategy resolve the deep divide between the two parties on fiscal matters?
Well, that remains to be seen. We are headed into a very high-stakes battle with a complete and utter impasse between the two parties. There's not a lot of signs that they're coming together and close to reaching an agreement on these things. There's no back-channel communications between Speaker Boehner, President Obama. There's no, kind of the Senate Republicans who had been negotiating with Obama. Those talks have stopped. So it's a very delicate point we're at, but we do still have several weeks before kind of the drop-dead moment comes.
Jonathan Strong writes on politics for the National Review. We thank you for your time today.
Well, thank you.
And very quickly, and once again, the House Rules Committee will be meeting on the rule for debating temporary government funding. We'll have it on C-SPAN 3.
The nays are 22, two-thirds in the affirmative. The rules are suspended. The bill is passed. And without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Washington seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on the bill H.R. 761.
Without objection, so ordered. Go to this now. Pursuant to House Resolution 347 and Rule 18, the Chair declares the House and the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for the consideration of H.R. 761. The Chair appoints a gentleman from Nebraska, Mr. Fortenberry, to preside over the Committee of the Whole.
And then what? The committee will be in order. The House is in the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for the consideration of H.R. 761, which the clerk will report by title.
A bill to require the Secretary of the Interior and the Secretary of Agriculture to more efficiently develop domestic sources of the minerals and mineral materials of strategic and critical importance to United States economic and national security and manufacturing competitiveness.
Pursuant to the rule, the bill is considered read the first time. The gentleman from Washington, Mr. Hastings, and the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Holt, each will control 30 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Washington.
Mr. Chairman, the committee is not in order.
The gentleman's correct. The committee will come to order. The committee will come to order. Members are reminded to please take their conversations off of the floor.
Gentleman from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I rise today in strong support of H.R. 761, the National Strategic and Critical Minerals Production Act. Not a day goes by when Americans don't use a product that is made from critical minerals. In fact, life as we know it in the 21st century would not be possible without these minerals. There would be no computers, no Blackberries or iPhones. There would be no MRI, CAT scan, or X-ray machines. There would be no wind turbines or solar panels. Mr. Chairman, the list is exhaustive of these things that depend on critical minerals that make modern life possible. Rare earth elements, a special subset of strategic and critical minerals, are core components of these products in the 21st century. Yet, despite the tremendous need for rare earth elements, the United States has allowed itself to become almost entirely dependent on China and other foreign nations for these resources. America has a plentiful supply of rare earth elements, but roadblocks to the development of these crucial materials have resulted in China producing 97% of the world's supply. Our current policies are handing China a monopoly on these elements, creating a dependence that has serious implications on American jobs, on our economy, and on our national security. Burdensome red tape, duplicative reviews, frivolous lawsuits, and onerous regulations can hold up new mining projects here in the U.S. for more than 10 years. These unnecessary delays cost American jobs as we become more and more dependent on foreign countries for these raw ingredients. The lack of America-produced strategic and critical minerals are prime examples of how America has regulated itself into a 100% dependence on at least 19 unique minerals. It has also earned the United States the unfortunate distinction of being ranked dead last when it comes to permitting mining projects. In 2012, the U.S. was ranked last, along with Papua New Guinea, out of 25 major mining countries on the pace of permitting. Now, Mr. Chairman, I can't speak for Papua New Guinea, but the reason the U.S. government is so slow to issue new mining permits is very simple: government bureaucracy. H.R. 761, introduced by our colleague from Nevada, Mr. Amodei, will help us to end the foreign dependence by streamlining government red tape that blocks American strategic and critical mineral production. Instead of waiting for over a decade for mining permits to be approved, this bill sets a goal of total review process for permitting at 30 months. Now, this isn't a hard deadline, Mr. Chairman. It can be extended. But it is a goal to push the bureaucrats into action on these important infrastructure projects. It shouldn't take a decade to get a project built for minerals that we need in our everyday life and for our national security. And finally, Mr. Chairman, above all, this is a jobs bill. The positive economic impact of this bill will extend beyond just the mining industry. For every metal mining job created, an estimated 2.3 additional jobs are generated. And for every non-metal mining job, another 1.6 jobs are created. This legislation gives the opportunity for American manufacturers, small businesses, technology companies, and construction firms to use American resources to help make the products that are essential to our everyday use. As China continues to tighten global supplies of rare earth elements, we should respond with an American mineral mining renaissance that will bring mining and manufacturing jobs back to America. The National Strategic and Critical Minerals Production Act is important to our jobs and to our economy. We must act now to cut the government red tape that is stopping American mineral production and furthering our dependence on foreign minerals. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Washington reserves. Gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, today we're considering H.R. 761, the so-called National Strategic and Critical Minerals Production Act of 2013. Now, despite the bill's title, it has almost nothing to do with national strategic and critical minerals production. In fact, under the guise of promoting the development of minerals critical to the United States national security, this legislation would reshape mining decisions on public lands for almost all minerals. Mr. Chairman, the bill's classification of critical minerals is so broad that even sand and gravel and other such things can fall under its definition. Critical and strategic minerals? The Democratic amendments we will consider today will attempt to tailor this legislation to cover only minerals that are truly critical and strategic, and will address the egregious provisions that would truncate important environmental review. Make no mistake, this bill is a giveaway. It is free mining, no royalties, no protection of public interest, exemption from royalty payments, near exemption from environmental regulations, near exemption from legal enforcement of the protections. And it's unnecessary. There is a real debate that we could be having about mining laws in this country. It should start with reforming the mining law of 1872, which is as archaic as its name suggests, the mining law of 1872. We should be discussing abandoned mine reclamation. We should be discussing ensuring taxpayers a fair return on industrial development of our public lands. Mr. Chairman, in the Natural Resources Committee markup on May 15th of this year, where H.R. 761 was reported out on a nearly party line vote, the committee also reported two other bills on a bipartisan basis. Two other bills that would lay the groundwork for developing critical and strategic mineral production. Those bills, H.R. 1063, the National and Strategic Critical Minerals Policy Act of 2013, and H.R. 981, the RARE Act, were unanimously reported out of the Natural Resources Committee and legitimately would be worth debating here in the House as part of any serious effort to improve our understanding of critical strategic mineral deposits and to aid in their development. We reported out bills on a bipartisan basis that would do what this legislation purports to do. We could be discussing those bills. Instead, we're taking up legislation which is a giveaway. The legislation we could be dealing with would actually deal with strategic and critical minerals. Now, if the majority were to bring it to the floor, I'm sure it would pass in an overwhelming bipartisan way and would likely be passed by the other body and signed into law. In fact, in the last Congress, the Critical and Strategic Mineral Policy Act, not to be confused with the Production Act that we're considering today, was supported by the National Mining Association. The President and CEO of the National Mining Association issued a statement when that bill passed out of committee last Congress, and he said, quote, the House Natural Resources Committee took important bipartisan action today to ensure U.S. manufacturers, technology innovators, and our military have a more stable supply of minerals vital to the products they produce and use. He went on to say that legislation, quote, will provide a valuable assessment of our current and future mineral demands and our ability to meet more of our needs through domestic policy production. We could be considering legislation like that. We should be able to work in a bipartisan fashion when it comes to improving our supply of rare earth minerals and other strategic minerals and ensuring that we're not dependent on China and other nations for their supply, but the majority seems to be not interested in that. Evidently, they don't want to work in a bipartisan fashion to produce legislation that all sides out there in the country, in industry, people who look after public lands and the environment could agree on. Instead, they're moving this bill, H.R. 761, which has almost nothing to do with strategic minerals, is really about giveaways to the mining industry. This bill would be a Trojan horse if it were to become law. However, it has no chance of becoming law. Maybe the American people should be grateful we won't pass this giveaway. That the American people, I say those American people who don't stand to get rich by this mining giveaway. But can the American people really feel good that we're wasting time and actually not looking after the critical and strategic minerals that American products, American defense depends on? Why are we playing these games? Why, I should say, are they playing these games with our legitimate needs to develop strategic minerals? We should be working in the kind of fashion that led to last year's bill. The majority should shelve this giveaway to the mining industry and bring to the floor serious proposals that we could honestly debate as part of a legitimate bipartisan discussion regarding rare earth policy and supply. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from New Jersey reserves. The gentleman from Washington is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I am very